The billionaire's dog barked at the police chief and uncovered a hidden truth. When a dog barked at the most powerful man in town, no one imagined it would expose the secret behind a man's death. Stay until the end, because what started as a morning walk will turn into a story about instinct, justice, and love that money could never buy. Now, let us go back to the beginning and to our main character. The air was thin and silver that morning, the kind of cold that wrapped around the quiet streets of Lakewood Estates. Dew clung to the trimmed grass, and somewhere in the distance, the soft hum of an early sprinkler echoed between the mansions. Emerson Blakemore held the leash in one hand and a coffee mug in the other. Luca, his golden retriever, trotted beside him, tail swinging with an easy rhythm. It was supposed to be another quiet Saturday, the kind that billionaires guarded like rare coins. But quiet never lasts when truth begins to stir. As they turned the corner toward the front gate, a police SUV rolled up the gravel path. The badge on the door gleamed under the morning sun. Chief Dalton. The man stepped out with a slow authority, his uniform crisp, his smile polite in that careful way powerful men smiled when they hid something. "Morning, Mr. Blakemore," Dalton said, adjusting his hat. "Just checking in about the accident report. Still no new leads." Emerson nodded, though the name accident twisted inside him like broken glass. His best friend had died in that crash a month ago, and the case had been closed too fast, buried under paperwork and condolences. Then, before another word could fall between them, Luca stiffened. His ears went high, his tail froze, and a low growl rolled up from his chest. "Luca," Emerson murmured, tugging the leash. But the growl turned into a sharp bark. One, then another, echoing off the stone walls. The dog lunged forward, teeth bared, barking at the police chief with a fury that came from somewhere deeper than fear. Dalton's smile flickered. "Easy there," he said, stepping back. His hand hovered near his holster, not from danger but from reflex. "You might want to get that animal under control." Emerson's voice stayed calm, though his pulse did not. He has never done that before. "Maybe he smells something," Dalton muttered, turning toward his car. The words felt heavier than he meant them to. At that exact moment, the gatehouse door opened, and a woman appeared, Carina Ortega, the young veterinarian who had come to give Luca his yearly vaccine. Her dark hair, long and loose, glowed warm against the pale morning light. She carried a small case and smiled politely, unaware of the tension hanging in the air. "Is everything all right?" she asked, kneeling beside Luca. The dog stopped barking the moment her hand touched his neck, as if her calm had settled him. Dalton tipped his hat. "Everything is fine, ma'am. Just a little misunderstanding." Carina looked up, meeting his eyes. Something about his tone made her glance back at Emerson. The billionaire's jaw was tight, his gaze locked on the police car pulling away. When the sound of the engine faded, only the breeze and the faint rattle of the leash remained. Luca pressed close to Emerson's leg, still uneasy. "He never reacts like that," Emerson said quietly. Carina straightened. "Dogs remember things we try to forget," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Maybe he just knows who to trust." Emerson looked at her, studying her face for a long second, and something unspoken passed between them, a small crack in the silence of privilege. Above them, the lake shimmered in the morning sun, pretending that nothing had changed. But deep inside Emerson Blakemore's chest, something had begun to move, the same way Luca had sensed it before anyone else could. And that was the morning when a billionaire's dog barked for the first time not at danger, but at the truth hiding behind a badge. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us continue the story. That afternoon, the clouds gathered again over Lakewood Estates. The same pale light that had glowed warm in the morning now felt cold, pressing through the tall windows of Emerson Blakemore's study. He sat behind a massive oak desk, documents scattered across its surface, old police reports, a few printed photos, and one small, torn map. Luca lay at his feet, restless, occasionally lifting his head toward the door as if waiting for someone. Ever since the encounter with Chief Dalton, Emerson could not shake the image of the man's eyes, too calm, too careful. He replayed Luca's barking in his mind, over and over, as though the dog had spoken in a language only truth could understand. The doorbell chimed. Carina Ortega stepped inside, still wearing her clinic jacket, her long dark hair pulled back from her face. She held a folder close to her chest. I hope I am not interrupting, she said. Not at all, Emerson replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. Luca has been waiting for you. As if on cue, the golden retriever stood and wagged his tail, but there was a faint tremor in his movement. Carina knelt to check his collar and ears, her touch gentle, precise. He is fine, she said softly, but still tense. Something must have scared him earlier. Emerson watched her hands as she worked, steady, sure, unafraid. You said earlier that dogs remember things, he murmured. Do you think they can remember people? She looked up, thoughtful. Not faces the way we do, but sense, emotions, energy. They remember what feels wrong. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. That dog barked like he recognized something dark. Dalton was there the night my friend died. I keep wondering if Luca sensed him before. Carina's eyes flickered. You think the crash was not an accident? I know it was not. He slid the torn map toward her, a section of the lake road, marked with red circles. The car went off the bridge, but the skid marks did not match the tires. The report says it was raining, but that night the sky was clear. She examined the papers. If that is true, someone changed the report. Someone with power, Emerson said quietly. There was a long silence. The ticking clock filled the space between them. Then Carina reached into her folder and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside it was a thin piece of metal, dull gray, with jagged edges. I found this earlier while brushing Luca, she said. It was caught in the lining of his collar. I thought it was just a broken tag, but look. She placed it under the desk lamp. A faint serial number was etched along the edge. Emerson stared at it. The numbers matched the batch code from police-issued ammunition, the same kind used by the department. For a moment, he could not breathe. Carina noticed the change in his face. What does it mean? It means, he said slowly, that my friend was not the only one in danger. Someone came close enough to my property to leave this behind. Outside, thunder rolled across the lake. Luca lifted his head again, whining softly, as if confirming what neither of them wanted to say aloud. Carina stood. You should report it. To the same police who buried the case? Emerson's tone was sharp, but not at her. No, I need proof before they come for me next. She hesitated, then nodded. Then let me help you. He looked at her, surprised. Why? Because if that piece of metal came from who I think it did, this is not just about your friend, she said. It is about every person who thinks power can erase truth. The storm began outside, wind shaking the glass panes. Emerson reached for the metal fragment, feeling its cold weight between his fingers. For the first time in weeks, he felt something that was not grief, it was determination. And as lightning lit the sky over Lakewood, Luca pressed close to his leg again, eyes fixed on the window. Somewhere beyond the rain, Chief Dalton's siren echoed faintly, not a coincidence, but a warning that the game had already begun. The storm carried through the night, washing the streets clean but leaving the air heavy with tension. By morning, the rain had stopped, yet the clouds still hung low over Lakewood Estates, gray and bruised. Emerson Blakemore barely slept. Every sound outside, a car passing, a door creaking, kept him on edge. Luca lay curled by the window, watchful, as if guarding the house. When the doorbell rang just after dawn, Emerson's heart leapt. He opened it to find Carina Ortega standing there, her jacket soaked, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She carried a small case and a determined look in her eyes. I ran the serial number, she said before he could speak. That metal fragment came from a bullet casing, police-grade issue. Emerson stepped aside to let her in. You are certain? I had a friend at the animal clinic who used to work in forensics. She confirmed it. That piece is not from a tag or a tool. It is ammunition. Emerson exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table. Then it is real. Everything I suspected. No co. Carina looked around the room at the stacks of papers and photos pinned across the corkboard. You have been doing this alone? I cannot trust anyone, he said quietly. Chief Dalton has eyes everywhere. Luca barked once, as if agreeing. Carina knelt to stroke his fur. Then maybe you should trust someone who does not owe him anything. He studied her face, searching for hesitation. There was none. You would risk that? Carina straightened. You saved me last night when that storm shorted the clinic's power. Now I save you from walking into this alone. Something in her voice disarmed him, not pity, but resolve. Emerson nodded. Then we start with the truth. He retrieved a small case from his desk and opened it. Inside was a mini camera, shaped like a pendant, attached to a narrow leather strap. This used to be my friend's. He recorded everything during his work at the city's development projects. He gave it to me a week before he died. Carina leaned closer. Does it still work? I am not sure. But if it does, it may hold more than I ever realized. He powered it on. The light flickered, weak, then steady. The screen displayed the last file name, Bridge, Footage, 1. Emerson's throat tightened as he pressed play. The footage was shaky, the image blurred by headlights. A car idled near the bridge. A second vehicle appeared behind it, a black SUV. The timestamp showed midnight. A shadow stepped out of the SUV, tall, broad-shouldered, uniformed. Even in the grainy footage, the shape of the badge glinted under the streetlight. Carina's hand flew to her mouth. That is him, Chief Dalton. Emerson froze, his chest pounding. The video ended abruptly, a flash of light, then static. He turned off the device. Now we have proof, he said. But no one will believe it came from me. Then let them hear it from someone else, Carina replied. I will take it to the press. The shelter has contacts who cover animal rights stories. If we frame this as part of an investigation into abuse of power, it will spread before they can bury it. That is dangerous. So is staying silent. Their eyes met. In that moment, a quiet agreement formed, not romantic, not yet, but rooted in something stronger. Trust. Emerson walked to the window. Outside, the rain had started again, light and persistent. Then we need to keep Luca close. If Dalton realizes what we know, he will come here first. Carina nodded. I will stay with him. I can monitor his stress and keep watch. He turned to her, and for the first time since the crash, his voice softened. Thank you, Carina, for believing the bark before the words. She smiled faintly. Sometimes the animals speak for the truth we are afraid to say. Thunder rumbled again, distant but approaching. Luca lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes sharp. Neither of them knew it yet, but that fragment of metal and the tiny camera had just shifted the story from suspicion to evidence, from fear to pursuit. And outside, under the returning storm, a black SUV idled near the corner of the estate once more, its engine running low and patient, waiting for nightfall to come. The next morning arrived heavy with fog. Lakewood looked softer under the pale light, yet there was a quiet tension in the air, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Emerson Blakemore stood by the large window of his study, coffee untouched, watching the mist drift over the lake. Beside him, Luca lay curled on the rug, tail flicking in restless sleep. Across the room, Carina Ortega was bent over the desk, reviewing the footage again and again. The small pendant camera hummed faintly, replaying the same few seconds, the shadow near the bridge, the badge reflecting in the light. It is him, she said finally. There is no question, Emerson nodded. Then we must act before he realizes what we have. Carina turned off the device and faced him. How do we do that without risking our lives? We release part of it, Emerson said. Enough to make the public curious, not enough to show the full truth. Once Dalton knows people are watching, he will make a mistake. Carina frowned. That could also push him to come after us sooner. Emerson looked down at Luca, who had lifted his head, eyes alert. Then we will be ready. Later that day, Carina left the estate to deliver the edited clip to a contact she knew at a local news site. The drive through the city felt longer than usual. Every red light seemed to last too long. Every car in her rearview mirror lingered just a little too close. When she finally reached the downtown office, her hands trembled slightly as she handed over the flash drive. The journalist, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, promised to verify the footage before publishing anything. If this is what you say it is, the entire department could fall, she said. Are you prepared for that? Carina managed a small, steady nod. Truth should never fear daylight. Back at the estate, Emerson was preparing for her return. He had installed new locks, secured his files, and set up an encrypted backup for the recordings. Every small sound outside the house made him turn. When his phone buzzed, his pulse spiked an unknown number. He answered. Silence, then a low voice. Mr. Blakemore, curiosity can be dangerous. You should focus on your business, not mine. It was Dalton. Emerson forced his voice to stay calm. You are crossing a line. Yoque, I crossed it long before you did, Dalton replied. Consider this a friendly warning. Then the line went dead. Emerson stared at the phone. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. Luca stood and began to growl, low and steady, his gaze fixed on the window. Emerson followed his eyes. Parked just beyond the trees was a black SUV, the same one from the footage. He drew the curtains closed and picked up the phone to call Carina, but before he could dial, the headlights vanished. It was after sunset when Carina returned. The house lights glowed warm against the dark sky, but something about the silence made her uneasy. She parked and walked up the steps. Before she could knock, the door opened. Emerson stood there, his expression composed but pale. "He called you, did he not?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Emerson replied. "He knows we are close." Carina stepped inside. "Then we must finish what we started. Once the press verifies the footage, there is no turning back." "Lou," he hesitated. "I will not let him hurt you." "You cannot control that," she said. "But you can choose to stop hiding." For a moment, they stood in the heavy stillness, the storm returning somewhere in the distance. Then a soft whine broke the silence. Luca pacing by the door, tail stiff, ears high. Carina crouched beside him. "What is it, boy?" A faint metallic click echoed outside, the unmistakable sound of a car door shutting. Emerson's eyes met hers. "Get to the back room," he said. But before either of them could move, the estate lights flickered once and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Luca barked, sharp and fierce, breaking through the silence, the same bark that had started it all. And in that moment, both Emerson and Carina knew that Dalton was not warning them anymore. He was coming. The power went out completely, leaving the estate wrapped in darkness. For a long moment, neither Emerson Blakemore nor Carina Ortega moved. Only the steady patter of rain against the windows and the deep growl of Luca filled the silence. Then, somewhere outside, gravel crunched under tires. Headlights swept briefly across the wall before disappearing again. Emerson reached for the small flashlight on his desk and switched it on. The narrow beam cut through the dark, landing on Carina's face, pale, alert, her long hair damp from the rain. "Stay close to Luca," he whispered. "If Dalton is here, he will not come to talk." "Commissioner?" Carina nodded. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears as she crouched beside the golden retriever. Luca's muscles were tense, his body leaning forward, every instinct alive. Then came the knock, 3 slow, deliberate taps on the front door. "Mr. Blakemore," a voice called. Smooth, confident, familiar. "We need to have a conversation." Emerson's jaw tightened. He set down the flashlight and moved toward the door. "He came to end it," he murmured. Carina caught his arm. "Do not open it, okay?" But Emerson did not plan to. Instead, he motioned for her to stay behind the curtain while he stepped quietly toward the entryway. The security camera screens were dead, but the faint blue emergency lights cast just enough glow to reveal a silhouette outside the frosted glass, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hat. "Dalton," Emerson said, his voice calm but cutting through the dark. "What do you want?" "I want what you took," Dalton replied. "The recording, the evidence. Hand it over, and no one gets hurt." Emerson glanced toward Carina. She held her breath. "You mean the truth," Emerson said. "That is what you want to destroy." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "You think anyone will believe a billionaire with a grudge? You are just another man with a guilty conscience." Before Emerson could answer, a loud crash shattered the silence, glass breaking in the back hall. Luca barked and bolted toward the sound. Carina ran after him, flashlight in hand. The beam caught the movement first, a dark figure crawling through the broken window. Rain blew in, cold and sharp. Luca lunged, teeth flashing, forcing the intruder back. The man stumbled, shouting, and Carina gasped as she saw the badge glint under the light. It was one of Dalton's officers. "Stay back!" the man yelled, pulling a weapon. Carina froze, but Luca did not. He barked again, fierce and unrelenting. The noise echoed through the hall, and before the officer could fire, Emerson appeared, holding a heavy bookend like a weapon. He struck the man's arm, knocking the gun to the floor. The officer fell back, dazed. Emerson kicked the gun away and pressed him against the wall. "Who sent you?" The man's jaw clenched. "You already know." Emerson's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "Then tell him I am not afraid." "Namasone." Carina's hands trembled, but she picked up the flashlight and pointed it toward the security panel. "The backup generator should restart the cameras," she said. "If we can capture this, we can prove everything." Within seconds, the estate lights flickered back to life. The power had returned. The hallway glowed again, revealing the chaos-shattered glass, rain puddling on the floor, the officer pinned beneath Emerson's grip. Dalton's voice returned, distant but clear through the open door. "You just made a very big mistake, Blakemore." Emerson looked toward the door, breathing hard. "No," he said. "For the first time, I did not." Outside, the sound of sirens began to rise, not Dalton's, but another unit. Carina stepped closer, her eyes wide. "You called them?" "I sent the footage before the power went out," Emerson replied. If we do not make it through this, the truth still will. Luca barked again, his tail high, his chest heaving. He stood between them and the open doorway, fearless. The sirens grew louder, the blue and red lights flashing across the rain-slicked driveway. For the first time in days, Carina felt something more than fear, it was hope. Emerson turned toward her, his voice steady. Whatever happens next, remember this night. It started with a dog's bark, and it will end with justice. Carina nodded, her hand resting on Luca's head. The golden retriever lifted his eyes toward the door, ready. And when the police vehicles stopped outside, their lights reflecting off the wet stone, Luca barked one last time, a sharp, clear sound that split the air like a signal. The truth was no longer hidden. It was coming through the front gate. The flashing red and blue lights painted the wet walls of the estate like moving fire. Officers rushed through the gates, rain streaking across their jackets. But this time, they were not Dalton's men. The county division had arrived, summoned by the footage Emerson had released moments before the blackout. Chief Dalton stood outside his car, his uniform immaculate despite the storm. His face was calm, but his eyes were ice. When the first officer approached him, Dalton lifted a hand. "Stand down," he ordered. "This is my investigation." The younger officer hesitated. "Sir, the call came directly from the State Bureau. They want control of the scene." "Coco." Dalton's expression barely changed, but his jaw tightened. He glanced toward the house where Emerson and Carina stood framed by the light spilling from the foyer. Luca stood in front of them, soaked but unshaken. Emerson stepped forward, voice steady. "You are not running the investigation anymore, Chief." Dalton smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "You think you can end me with a piece of video? You forget who built this department. Come on." Emerson raised a small device, the same camera that had recorded Dalton's crime. "You built it on silence." But silence just lost its leash. The officer from the State Bureau stepped between them. "Chief Dalton, you are under investigation for obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. Please hand over your badge and weapon." For a long second, no one moved. The rain hissed around them, then Dalton's hand twitched toward his holster. Luca barked once, sharp and piercing, the sound echoing off the marble steps. It broke the moment. The officers drew their weapons first, surrounding Dalton in a half-circle. Dalton froze, his hand falling away. He looked directly at Emerson. "You should have left it buried," he said quietly. "Now you will never sleep again." Emerson met his gaze. "Neither did my friend after you killed him." The chief's shoulders sagged slightly as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. The younger officers led him toward one of the waiting cars. His voice carried over the rain. "You have no idea what kind of people you just exposed." Emerson's reply was calm but certain. "Then we will expose them too." The doors slammed shut, and the convoy of vehicles pulled away, their sirens fading into the distance. The estate was quiet again except for the rain and the steady breathing of the dog. Carina exhaled, the tension finally leaving her body. "It is over," she whispered. Emerson shook his head. "Not yet. There will be questions and more threats, but at least now the truth is out." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "You did what no one else dared to do." He looked at her with quiet gratitude. "We did." Luca nudged her leg, then sat between them, tail brushing the wet floor. She laughed under her breath. "And him, the real hero." Emerson crouched beside the dog, running his hand through the wet fur. "He knew before any of us did," he said. "Sometimes instinct sees what reason refuses to." The next morning broke calm and gold over Lakewood. News crews gathered at the front gate, their microphones catching words like corruption, cover-up, and heroic act. The footage from the pendant camera had gone viral overnight. Across the country, people were talking about the billionaire who trusted his dog more than the system. Inside the house, Carina poured coffee while Emerson watched from the window. The estate, once silent, now felt alive again. "You could rebuild all this," she said. "Use your resources to help others who were silenced." Emerson nodded slowly. "That is what I plan to do. A foundation for truth and protection in Luca's name." Carina smiled. The Luca Foundation. Luca, lying on the rug, thumped his tail once in agreement. For the first time since his friend's death, Emerson felt peace. The air smelled clean after the storm. Carina stood beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. Outside, the lake shimmered with light, calm and endless. He turned to her. "Thank you for staying." She met his eyes. "Thank you for believing me." "No," he said softly. "Thank you for believing him." Luca barked once more, as if sealing the promise. And as the morning sun filled the room, the echoes of last night's chaos faded, leaving behind a single truth. Sometimes the smallest voice, the instinct of a loyal heart, can bring down an empire of lies. Days passed, and the headlines kept spreading. The chief exposed by a dog. Billionaire breaks the silence. Truth has teeth. Every news outlet carried the story, yet Emerson Blakemore did not feel victorious. Justice had begun, but peace was still far away. Inside the estate, things were quieter now. The police had come and gone, collecting evidence, sealing off Dalton's old office downtown. But at night, the weight of everything pressed against the walls. Emerson found himself standing by the same window each evening, watching the reflection of the lake. It was beautiful, but it also reminded him of what he had lost. Carina Ortega noticed. She spent most of her days helping Luca recover from the chaos of that night. The golden retriever had a few stitches on his leg and a bruise near his shoulder, but his spirit remained bright. He followed Carina everywhere, sleeping near her whenever she stayed at the estate. One evening, as the sunset bled gold across the water, Carina walked into the study with 2 mugs of tea. Emerson was seated at the desk, reviewing the official report the State Bureau had sent. "They confirmed everything," he said quietly. "Dalton's entire network has collapsed. Several officers confessed. There will be a full trial." Carina placed a mug in front of him. "Then that is the end." He shook his head. "No, that is the beginning. Exposing the truth is only half the fight. The rest is rebuilding what they destroyed." She smiled faintly. "You sound like a man who finally knows what to do with his power." Emerson looked at her, really looked at her this time. "Maybe I just needed someone to remind me that power means nothing without purpose." A silence followed, soft and full. The only sound was the quiet breathing of Luca near the fireplace. Carina reached into her coat pocket and placed something on the table, the small broken piece of metal they had found in Luca's collar. Cleaned, polished, it no longer looked like evidence. It looked like a symbol. "I kept it," she said. "Not because of what it was, but because of what it changed." Emerson took the fragment in his hand. "Then let it remind us of the night truth barked louder than fear." She nodded, her eyes glimmering in the warm light, and of the man who listened. Luca lifted his head, tail brushing the rug, as if understanding the moment. Outside, the world was moving again. Journalists, lawyers, supporters, all calling for interviews and statements. But inside that quiet room, everything slowed. Emerson finally felt the calm he had been chasing since his friend's death. He turned toward Carina. "When this is all over, I want to rebuild the community center near the lake, a place where people can come without fear. Will you help me run it?" Carina smiled. "I thought you would never ask." And as the last light of day slipped behind the horizon, Luca stretched, rested his head on his paws, and sighed, a sound of peace, of home. For the first time, the estate no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a beginning. The morning of the trial arrived under a clear sky. The storm that had once haunted Lakewood was gone, leaving the air sharp and bright. News vans lined the courthouse steps, their cameras already rolling. The story had reached every corner of the country: the billionaire, the brave veterinarian, and the dog whose bark had shattered corruption. Emerson Blakemore stepped out of the black sedan, dressed in a dark gray suit, his expression steady. Carina Ortega walked beside him, wearing a simple navy coat. In her arms, she carried a folder containing the evidence that had brought them here. Luca trotted between them, tail wagging, wearing a small blue vest embroidered with the words, "Support Animal." Reporters called out their names, microphones flashing, but Emerson did not stop. He held the courthouse door for Carina and Luca, his eyes calm but resolute. Inside, the air was thick with quiet tension. Dalton sat at the defense table, his face pale but composed. He no longer wore a badge, only a suit that seemed too tight around his shoulders. When his eyes met Emerson's across the room, a flicker of something crossed his face, not anger this time, but defeat. Carina took a seat beside Emerson. She rested the folder on the table, her fingers brushing the edge. "Are you ready?" she whispered. Emerson looked at her and smiled faintly. "I have been ready since the day he threatened you." "Too." The prosecutor presented the footage from the pendant camera first. The room watched in silence as the video played on the large screen, the bridge, the black SUV, the glint of Dalton's badge. Then came the audio from the phone call he had made the night of the attack, his voice unmistakable. Every detail lined up, every lie undone. When the video ended, the courtroom remained silent. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. The judge cleared his throat and spoke softly. "This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed to sentencing." Dalton's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering frantically, but Dalton did not respond. His gaze had drifted toward Luca, who sat quietly beside Carina's chair. The dog stared back with calm, steady eyes, the same eyes that had seen through fear, through deceit, through darkness. Outside, when it was all over, reporters surrounded them again. One asked, "Mr. Blakemore, do you believe justice has been served?" Emerson paused, looking down at Luca, then at Carina. "Justice is not a destination," he said. "It is a choice you make every time you decide to stand up for the truth." The cameras clicked, capturing the image of the three of them standing on the courthouse steps, the billionaire who found his courage, the woman who refused to walk away, and the dog whose instinct never lied. Later that evening, they returned to the estate. The lake was calm again, mirroring the first stars of night. Carina poured tea while Emerson set Luca's new collar on the table, a silver tag engraved with 2 words. Carina fastened it gently around Luca's neck. "He earned it," she said with a smile. Emerson nodded. "So did you." For a moment, the world outside seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of the water and the soft rhythm of Luca's breathing. The storm had passed, but the lesson it brought remained that truth, once spoken, never goes silent again. A full year passed. Lakewood had changed, quieter now, lighter somehow, as if the whole town had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The old wounds were healing. The courthouse that once drew crowds for Dalton's trial now stood still beneath the morning Sunday. And by the lake, where the storm had once raged, a new building shimmered in glass and light, the Luca Foundation. Its doors opened, for the first time that day. Cameras and visitors filled the front lawn, where a small stage faced the water. A banner hung above the entrance. Justice, compassion, truth. Carina Ortega stood at the podium, her long hair loose, the wind lifting it softly. She smiled as she looked at the crowd, local families, volunteers, and even a few officers who had joined after the department's reform. Emerson Blakemore stood beside her, one hand in his pocket, the other resting on Luca's head. The golden retriever wore a new blue collar with the silver tag engraved, "The Truth." Carina began to speak, her voice clear and warm. This foundation was born from a single act of instinct, from a dog who refused to be silent when something felt wrong. That bark led us to a truth that changed not only our lives, but this community. Today, we honor that courage by building a place where no voice goes unheard. The audience applauded. Emerson stepped forward next, his voice deeper, steady. "For years, I believed power was measured by how much you could control. But I learned that real power is the courage to act when silence is easier. This foundation will stand for that belief that kindness is strength and truth is freedom." He paused, his gaze finding Carina's. "And I could not have done this without the people who taught me that." The crowd quieted as a moment of stillness spread through the air. Luca barked once, short and bright, as if to cue what came next. Emerson smiled, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. The sound of the lake breeze and the clicking of cameras filled the pause. Carina's eyes widened as he opened it. Inside, a simple gold ring, delicate but strong. Emerson's voice softened. "You reminded me that the greatest truths are not found in courtrooms, but in hearts that refuse to give up. Will you keep walking beside me, no matter how far the truth takes us?" Her answer came with tears and laughter all at once. "Yes, always." The applause rose like the sound of waves. Luca barked again, tail wagging, circling them as the crowd cheered. The sky above Lakewood turned golden with evening light, reflections shimmering across the calm water. As the ceremony ended, Emerson placed the framed photograph of Luca's first bark at the gate, the image that had started everything. Beneath it, a plaque read, "When truth speaks, even a bark can echo forever." The camera panned wide across the lake, capturing the new beginning. A man, a woman, and a loyal dog walking side by side, the wind moving gently through the flags of the Luca Foundation. The storm was long gone, but its echo lived on, not in fear, but in faith. And in that golden hour, their story found its peace.